Oh, but they did do the courtesy.
Okay.
I set my time.
Yeah, she called.
Okay.
That way that it's 5:30 according to Verizon, not according to me.
Yeah.
No?
I think you'd have been a good choice and you got us out of our hair.
Those what doors?
Just for that state problem, if I wasn't elected, I'd be here twice as often.
Yeah, you probably would.
I would. That's a problem.
Hey, Chief.
God, I thought Jim's getting
Is it all right talking?
How are you? Sure.
Hey, we talked early about opening these patio doors so that people out in the hallway can hear them.
If they want to be quiet and listen.
You can open them, have your guys open them, and well, there's
a hook on the bottom.
Hook on the bottom.
Yeah.
You peel them back and hook them, and
Yeah, there's a hook on the bottom. I hook
They
them
swing
out.
in?
They swing in.
Oh, the in, okay.
you know how communication is. Hey,
Something about the
especially
people
those
outside.
down there, especially those middle ones, and it wouldn't hurt for these too. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, hook them on you.
Oh, boy. Oh, I see the hook now.
Yeah, there's a I hook here, and a tongue on it.
Joey's on it.
There it is.
Gosh, don't be like.
Pictures.
And I've got a little timer here for the 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Dorman. Dorman at the Dorchester.
That one won't work. Won't go back far enough, I don't think.
Hey. So
How do you
it's
know
okay
all this
that I
stuff?
set mine here?
Oh.
Because see, I do this. You don't.
Are you kidding me? What did it look like before?
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, this?
Phillips Brothers rebuilt this bench,
Back's
and
getting a little sore from carrying.
all the woodwork was painted. It had some women from Boone.
It's muscle. It's just building muscle. That's all it
That'll be
is.
the day, freshman. Oh, wait a minute. You're not a freshman anymore, are you?
Months.
Refinished all the wood.
Up around the doors and stuff.
Yeah, they got it all.
See, I'll bet all that was wood too, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's wood, but I don't know.
Oh, like 16 years.
I think it's.
I feel like I'm as old as
Is that age discrimination?
I've gotten younger.
discriminating.
Tread lightly.
Sounded like a little, I got witnesses.
Discrimination.
Facts.
I wouldn't say
You've
you were
never
less
used
of a
those
person.
before, so why did you start now? Man. This is my water.
Don't worry, I won't drink out of it. I might throw it at you if you talk too much, but
And Matt was just having problems with the whole logo. Matt was telling us tacking the logos up here. Fresh.
We plan on.
Good evening. It is 5:30. We're going to call this special meeting to order. I'd like to remind you to turn your cell phones to silent or vibrate. And then let's all please stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Amanda, would you take the roll?
Councilmember Rowe.
Here.
Councilmember Stevens.
Here.
Councilmember Strebe.
Here.
Councilmember Dalby.
Here.
Councilmember Myers.
Here.
Mayor Lazio.
Present.
Okay, I need an item or a motion for the approval of tonight's agenda.
So move.
Second.
Councilmember Rowe.
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens.
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe.
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby.
Yes.
Councilmember Myers.
Yes.
At this time, I'd like to mention that anyone in the audience that wants to address the council needs to fill out a sheet. There are on the counter there. Give us your name and address and what the topic is. This is for items on the agenda. I will make the comment that after we have some presentations tonight, we'll give those of you who want to address some of the specific things about the special meeting tonight, we'll call you up at that time. So if there's somebody that wants to fill out a form that hasn't had a chance, now's the chance to bring that up or give it to one of our staff, and Amanda will add it to our list. Before we go into the items on the agenda tonight, I would like to ask City Administrator Morris to make some comments about the sustainability with the library.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a note, I try and give you a heads up in terms of items that are coming to the council at upcoming meetings. That our next regular council meeting on the 5th, Sonny Fiala, the librarian here in Ottumwa, is going to come and speak to council for a little while about a statewide strategic planning effort initiative that the statewide library system is doing in the state of Iowa, and she'll outline that in some of her efforts. It's simply an information piece they're undertaking, but again, she will be with us that evening. If she provides any additional materials, I'll be sure and provide those to council.
Great. Thank you, Andy. The other comment I would make before we get into the agenda items, as most of you know, we had the Fly Iowa Air Show this weekend, and I just want to take a moment to thank the community, especially our sponsors and our volunteers. This is really a great effort, and it was only possible because of all the hard work of all the people. But I do want to recognize a couple of individuals, Pam Coppins and Audrey Keck, who headed up our airport committee to really put this together, and then especially Chris Cobbler, who just jumped into the airport supervisor position, I think 51 days ago, and J.D. Wheaton. They were just super to work with, and we had nothing but great comments from the pilots, the air boss, the announcer, and all the ground crew that came with them. So again, it was a great effort, and I just want to tell you that that's the kind of thing we need to do more. It was a great family event, and thought that it was a weekend. The weather was perfect, so we hope we can do it again, and we'll be talking about it. We have a debriefing meeting coming up next week, so we'll give you more information as we get through that.
If I may, Mayor, though, I would certainly add your name to that group. I think you were on that planning committee throughout, and I know all the time and effort that you and all of them put in. So yes, thank you to all of you.
Sure. Thanks. Okay, let's go into the items that are listed.
Authorize the obligation of $10,000 of city funds to assist the Ottumwa Community School District's light installation project, Legion High School baseball field. Recommendation, authorize the funding.
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Okay. Who's, Andy, are you going to take that?
That's correct,
So
Mayor.
give us
Mr.
a
Mayor,
background.
that item, you see the $10,000 of city funds, as you will note in the staff summary, that is for installation of lighting at the Legion Field and high school baseball field. One of the items I want to point out, that $10,000 the city would put forward, that is available monies. As you may recall, near the end of the last fiscal year, we canceled the Buxton contract. That saved the city approximately $50,000. That $10,000 comes from that amount. That will be used to supplement their efforts. And again, as the staff summary noticed, the $10,000 will only be put forward if the grant application is successful. But I'm asking council for authorization to expend that $10,000 again if Kim Hellige is successful in her efforts in securing that grant. I should add the total project costs are approximately $245,000.
Okay. Any questions for Andy?
Here, and I got a question here.
Sure.
Really not a question, it's more of a comment here, or maybe a question. So the project here is consisting of replacing the lights at the Legion Field,
And the total cost of that project will be anywhere from $235,000 to $255,000. Okay, and this would be a $10,000 local match to get that grant going. The first thing I thought when I read this is, we got a lot of different fields that we own around the city of Ottumwa, and this seems like an awful small amount of money to get a lot of return on for our baseball fields. Are these grants pretty common out there, or is this just one that the schools identify? Because if this is something that's offered, maybe we should look into writing some grants to getting some of our lighting replaced in our various fields too.
Point well taken. Kim usually heads up that process in terms of going after grant monies for that. If she has access to other available sources, I'm not aware of them, but from time to time she will come and ask us about grant matches. I know she's done that a great deal with the Parks Department, and this lends itself to that. There may be other grant venues that she pursues beyond this.
I'd like to see us look at and see if there are, have a conversation with her about that. This is a good deal.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, take the roll.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.
Resolution number 189, 2017, setting consultation meeting for September 7th with other taxing entities, Wapello County and the school district, and setting October 3rd, 2017 for a public hearing on a proposed amendment number 7 to the Westgate Economic Development Urban Renewal Plan in the city of Ottumwa, state of Iowa. Recommendation, pass and adopt resolution number 189, 2017.
Move the recommendations presented.
Second.
Thank you. Good evening, Jody Gates. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Amendment number 7 is going to add area to our existing Westgate Urban Renewal Plan, and the area that it will add encompasses the former Washington Junior High School property. And with the addition of this area, the city will be able to provide a tax rebatement for the Washington Apartments project. The council had previously approved providing up to $39,000 a year for 10 years as a tax rebatement incentive for this project. We'll have a consultation meeting with the other taxing entities with Wapello County and the school district, and that's set for September 7th. We'll be sending out information to those entities tomorrow after this is approved this evening. And then we'll have a public hearing to approve amendment number 7 on October 3rd.
Okay. Any questions for Jody about this? Pretty straightforward. Okay. Take the roll.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jody.
Overview of fiscal year 2016-17 budget and discussion of public safety staffing.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to recognize the fact that we have a full house, and this is a meeting in the public, but it's not a public debate. And if you want to address some of the comments that are going to be made tonight, we want your sheet up here. I'd like to call on Andy to start us off, and I think Andy will introduce our speakers. So.
Right. Thank you, Mayor. Bob Jay is going to be the first speaker now. I do want to point out this consists of 2 components, and the first component of the presentation is going to be, as it states, an overview of the 2016-2017 end fiscal year budget and how the city, quite frankly, fared in that process. The second component, as you see, is relative to discussion of staffing, as you noted, in public safety. I'm going to address that from a police department perspective. In addition to that, a fire department perspective. And again, after I'm finished with that presentation, I will, just like the council, field questions and comments that people may have. But I think at this point, I think it would be wise just to turn the microphone over to Mr. Jay and let him give that presentation, and I'll follow suit. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, Bob.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Andy. I have to apologize. I'm not a PowerPoint guy, so that came out a lot smaller than what we intended it to. But I'll go down through it and kind of give you the highlights of the general fund for this year. There were 2 spreadsheets that I prepared analyzing gross expenditures per department as budgeted in the annual budget for the review. I had given you guys a copy of this a week or so ago when I finalized it. Budgeted revenue increased by $322,531, but without the inclusion of bond revenue that's on the budget, it would have been under by $122,000. Budget expenditures were $185,000 under the original budget expenditures. I included the original budget amounts because that's what we go by when we initially set the budget up. When we make the adjustment for the budget expenditures, we're doing that to comply with state code. So, like I said, we were pleased to announce that we had originally budgeted a $350,000 increase, and we actually increased it by $867,000. But of that, $377,000 is from leftover bond money that's obligated, which leaves a $490,000 increase. This is a $136,592 increase over previous estimate. And basically, it's because of the additional camping fees and the investment income has turned around for us. We're getting a lot better rates on the CDs. Taking the increase in the fund balance into account for the current year, less the amount obligated for the budget projects, the increase brings our fund balance up to 21.47% of our expenditures. That's a healthy fund balance for the future, keeping in mind that we will potentially lose the backfill, possibly for this year, depending on who you talk to, and next year. So going down through next, Matt. Like I said, it's hard to see, and I apologize for that. The big thing, we had a $363,000 decrease in property taxes that were collected. And then you can go down over the next page. And then the bond proceeds, $445,000, wasn't previously budgeted. School resource officers increased by $25,643 because when we prepared the budget, we had not previously budgeted for the full amount of reimbursement. And Chief McAndrew went back to the school and got a different contract with them, covered that. Court fines are down $52,000. And then go to the 2 more pages, Matt. And this is where the big increase is. The camping fees are up $110,000 over what we had originally budgeted. And the admissions, the daily admissions are up $33,000. And then say the investments income basically doubled over what we originally anticipated. So next page. As we go through here for the expenditure side, the police department was $16,000 over budget. Dispatch was $4,500 over budget. The drug grant was $13,000 under. Various police grants were $9,700 over. The levy maintenance fund or levy maintenance account was $18,800 over budget or under budget. Fire was under budget $71,000. Animal control $7,000. Engineering $64,000. Refuse $15,000. And health department $51,000. Parks was over $77,000. Beach was under 10. The hotel motel tax payments out were under $23,447. Planning and development was under $30,000. And the Bridgeview Center subsidy was under $35,000. As you remember, we received a larger amount from Bridgeview Center, Inc. And then the final one, very last page, Matt. There you go. Shows a comparison of fund balance. This was taken from the FY 2016 audit for our sister cities that we use as a comparison. Clinton had a fund balance of $2,236,000, which is 14.74% of their expenditures. Burlington had $2,870,000, which was 15.92%. Ottumwa, $3,165,000. And that's at 21.47%. Marshalltown, I'm sorry, 23.23%. Marshalltown had a 25.93% of their expenditures with a balance of $3,718,000. Muscatine, $4,598,000 for 27.15%. Mason City, $6,859,833, 36.66% fund balance of their expenditures. Fort Dodge, $4,145,000, 44%, and Oskaloosa, our closest city to the north there, had $3,315,000, which was 68% of their operating expenditures. So once again, this year, last fiscal year was a very pleasant surprise. I believe that the camping fees have stayed up on top as a result of the additional construction work out at the Line Energy plant out west of us, and which then allows for also the motel hotel tax revenues have been up. So, if you have any questions?
Okay, any questions for any of the information that you've previously received? Go ahead.
Bob, just a real quick, and maybe a typo there. On my sheet, our reserve ratio is on the sheet that you'd given us a week ago, and things may have changed. 22.8. Now it's down to 21.4, I believe.
Yeah, that was the first one I gave you, because there was a final that went out also. So that was with the preliminary.
Okay, thank you.
So I gave you a couple of them because you all wanted it before everything was closed out. So
21.4 is the actual.
yeah, it's the final one. So
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
Mayor, if it's all right, the next component of the presentation, as we said, the first one is for Bob Jady of the presentation on how we finished the fiscal year, the recently concluded fiscal year of 16-17. As you can see, we actually finished that in a pretty good condition, increased the fund balance by approximately $350,000. That has gone well. As it relates to police and fire, as you can see on the itinerary, what I want to do next is ask Chief McAndrew to speak a little bit about the process of the civil service exam. I know council members have stated their concerns and frustration with our inability to hire police officers in a much more expeditious fashion. The chief is going to talk about that a little bit, and I'm going to touch briefly on some staffing issues in the police department, and then after that, my slideshow will come up on the fire department. Okay, very good. All right, Chief, go ahead.
Good evening, Chief. We're glad to have you here and look forward to your report.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. I've been asked to talk just about the civil service process, and it won't take very long. The short story is, if we hire anyone this round, we're going to have those officers answering their calls about a year from now. That's how long it takes us to go through this process. We're actually just starting the process, so I'll kind of run through what we're going through right now so you can kind of understand why it takes so long to get someone, a patrol officer, out on the street and answering calls on his own. We're taking applications right now for the position of police officer. We've been advertising for about a month. We're going to accept the applications until September 8th. That's the deadline. So we'll take those applications. We'll then start doing background checks on the applicants to see if they can even test with us. And then we'll do our testing in October. I believe it's October 6th is our testing date. To date, we've had 5 applications. So that's a little bit concerning. I will say that this is not the time of year to be doing the testing, just because our applicants are in college right now. We really like to test in May when they're graduating from college and they're looking for their jobs. So this is going to be a very tough round of hiring. So October 6th is our testing date. After we do the testing process, we will do background checks on the potential hires, and then we will be looking to hire them at the end of December or the 1st of January, because that's when the academy starts. The ILEA Academy will be the 1st or 2nd week of January. We don't know for sure. After those officers go to the academy, they're there for 14 to 15 weeks. If they graduate from the academy, then they come back here to the police department and they're on another 15 weeks of field training. That's before they answer their first call on their own. So if you just do the dates, the roundabout date is about the end of July, 1st of August. These officers will be hitting the street with us and answering calls, and we can actually count them as personnel on the street. That's pretty much it. The short story again is this round of hiring, it'll take about a year. The list has been exhausted. What happens is we tested last spring. Those people were just getting out of college and tested. The people we have on our list have moved on. They're not going to wait until we hire again. They've moved on to other jobs. So I have petitioned the Civil Service Board to exhaust our list, and now we're starting over. I'd be glad to take any questions about the civil service.
Are there any questions for the
Process.
chief?
I have one.
Okay, let's start with Skip and we'll go down the line.
If I looked at the civil service list correctly on the board downstairs, it seems like it ran out 2015. Am I correct? Am I looking at the latest one?
I don't think you are now.
Then the other one isn't posted. I guess my question was going to be, when the civil service list is either exhausted by hiring or disqualification, wouldn't you recommend or request giving another test to keep a current list there in front of you all the time?
Not really. It depends on the list. It depends on the time of year. We really want to test in the spring because that's when I'll get all the good applicant pool. If we hire one person off that list and then 8 months later, we go back to that list, normally the top couple guys that we want to hire have already moved on. Everyone's hiring police officers right now. So that list is good for 2 years.
Yes.
But usually it's only good for about 2 or 3 months because they come and they test with us. If we don't hire them right away, they move on to another position. By the time we're ready to hire again, say 6 months into the list, the only people left on those lists are people that we don't want to hire.
So the short answer is you don't want to really test until the spring of the year when you get more applicants.
Right. It costs us money. We do MMPI testing and the personality testing. This all costs us money, and it doesn't make sense for us to do another test if we're not hiring.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Rowe, you had a question?
Actually, I was going to ask pretty much the exact same thing. So.
Okay. Councilman Myers.
Okay, yes, Chief. At least in my time on council, it seems that there have been several cases where you, the city, has hired or started the process, paid for the academy, the training, and within a very short period of time, for whatever good reason, that person leaves. And yet, as you said, here it takes a year of that training and everything else before we could ever get them on the street. But there is that variable, isn't there, where you have no control over the fact that we're spending that time, we're spending that money, and yet for whatever good reason, they leave you.
That's correct. They do leave us. Me and Point, I came here with thinking I was only going to be here 2 years and ended up getting involved in stuff and like the community, and I stayed. But that is an issue. It's probably, I would say 50% of the people that we hire probably at some point are going to move on. They're getting out of college. They're wanting to get their foot in the door. Atum was a good department. We have a good reputation of turning out really good officers. So they come here, they're here for a couple of years and they've got their experience. They're at the top of the list if they go to any other departments in the state and test.
I think most recently, though, we've had one that wasn't even with us for a year, wasn't it, when he went to Des Moines?
I'm not for sure who you're talking about there now.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, Councilman Rowe.
You said the best time to hire officers is in the springtime, right after graduation, so around the May timeframe. Is that correct? Okay. So I guess one of my concerns is we had given authorization as a council to have somebody on deck, or at least going through the process around the beginning of this fiscal year, around July 1. If the best time to hire or to redo that civil service list was right around that time frame, why wasn't that done?
I'm not for sure what you're talking about authorizing. I cannot hire anyone until I have an actual opening. That would be great, and there are departments out there doing that, and I would think it'd be great if you guys would consider that. However, that would be a non-budgeted personnel. And my understanding is that I cannot hire until.
That actually was a budgeted position. That was when we were doing the budget hearings. We actually did discuss keeping that position open with the intent to hire that position starting this fiscal year.
Yeah, maybe Andy can address that because that was in the agreement that we were going to fill we took one police officer and end up getting 2 dispatchers, and then we left the position open.
Councilman Rowe is correct. At the beginning of the fiscal year that we're in now, and as you know, we're more than ahead of the game in terms of when the city council and staff starts working developing the budget. There was an authorization from council to hire another police officer. So that position was budgeted. That's going to be part of one of the items I'm going to mention. I authorized the chief, again, that one's in the budget. I authorized the chief at the beginning of the fiscal year to go ahead and hire that person. The reason I did not move on that position during the year, as you may recall, and this is, I'll mention this a little bit further in my presentation, is because you may recall from that meeting, my instruction back to council was, I'm going to do what you tell me to do. If you want me to hire one officer or 15 officers, I can do that. But as you may recall, at the time, I expressed my concerns financially, not only about the city, what was going on in the community. And the council endorsed that. And that was, what was our financial condition? We did finish the year in a very good condition, but as you may recall, this was also on the heels of when Kmart and Target both closed. In addition to that, we were also getting some rumors that MC Sports was going to close. Our coverage ratio, and I know the finance director, Bob Jays, talked about that, about 23%. It was around 18 when we started they finished the last fiscal year that we just concluded. So that was my concern, is I did not want to fill that position financially anyway, because I shared my concerns with the city. So that wasn't something to put on the onus of the chief. That was something that I held off on until I felt the city was in better financial condition. As Bob Jay just indicated, when we had the report as to how we finished the 16-17 fiscal year, it was at that point that I authorized him to hire that unfilled position.
And I'm not trying to point fingers, don't get me wrong. Sure. I'm just trying to get to the facts. You know, it seems strange that, you know, even if we were waiting to the point to find out whether we had the finances available to do it, why we wouldn't at least start the process rolling, because just to have an updated list would have at least put us one step further in the game than what we are now.
No, that's a point well taken. And if you want to point fingers, as they say, you need to point that at me, because I was the one that held off on that, hiring that person until we got to the end of the fiscal year. We have authorized that, but that was a decision that I made. If council was uncomfortable, then they could have reversed me. But certainly when we had two major retailers leave the community and that coverage ratio was beginning to shrink, that was a concern that I have and still have as it relates to our finances. We did have a very good end fiscal year, as Bob Jay indicated. It's not all high tides and green grass, and we have our challenges.
Thank you both.
Go ahead.
Your Honor, I just want a couple questions for Andy, maybe the chief too here. My recollection of that meeting was, and I remember our discussions that you just alluded to about, you know, wanting to make sure that the fiscal or the financial state of the city was in good shape. However, I think the direction of the council was to have the chief come to you and tell you if he felt he needed more officers. Was that, do you remember that being the case?
That is a correct statement. That was a conversation between Chief McAndrew and I.
Okay, and just to make it clear, this position that we had authorized the chief to come forward if he needed and you to okay was a budgeted position. It was in the budget.
Correct.
Separate from the financial condition of the city. That was budgeted in the previous fiscal year, correct? Okay, I just want to make sure that's clear.
That's correct.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. All right. Anything else, Andy or Tom, you want to add to the mix of information?
I'll just add, if I might, because I want the chief to clean up on this, as I say, because this is probably the final component of what we've talked about the police staffing, and that is this. As Councilman Dalby pointed out, I do want to point out that there were two officer positions that we did fill when this current fiscal year began. And I want to be crystal clear on this. Those were budgeted monies that were available. I didn't, as it related, as you said, the open spot for the police officer, then we also had an additional open spot with some money that we'd had with the communications officers. When that amount of money was there and available, then we authorized, I consulted with Bob Jay, and Bob wanted to move a little faster than I did, and I held off on those two positions until actually we got into the month. I wanted to wait till we got in the month of September. After Bob Jay showed me the figures, then I authorized those two positions, officer positions in the police department.
Go ahead.
That leaves me another question, and I appreciate that. That's exactly what I remember. But this may go to the chief here. I don't know. during this time, when we look at what was budgeted in last fiscal year, in May, when you did the testing, Chief, we had, how many positions were open or vacant, not open position? We have that in the budget. That's not a good term to use. How many positions were vacant at that time?
I'm not for sure. I'm using that date of May as a time that we like to test. I can maybe ask Nick. Last time we tested was when? I'm not for sure what the last time. We don't test unless we have an open position.
Okay, and that's that. And I think, and I'm just legitimately asking this because I don't know the timeline either. I know that open position's been in there, but I think there is at least 2 officers that have left since beginning of the year. One of which is, a separate issue, and one of which should have been a vacant position. I just didn't know when that came into effect.
I'm not for sure exactly which ones you're talking about.
That would be. Do I have permission to use the name?
No, I know of one position you're talking about that's just still open,
Yeah.
but the other one I'm not for sure which one you're talking about. We lost the Ottumwa Housing Authority officer position. But that's not an open
I didn't
position.
I didn't know if we'd filled that position. The one I'm referring to here, I know of 2 that are open now. One of which I know hasn't been filled for other various reasons. And I was wondering if this one here, and I don't know if anyone wants to come up and look at this, if that one was filled, because that would leave a vacancy around about the time we test. I would imagine.
I'm not for sure which one you're talking about.
I don't know if this puts it in perspective or not.
I don't want to use the name.
No, and that's not, I can respect that. But the other item is, and I've shared this with council, and both Chief McAndrew and Chief Miller can speak to this, and that is the issue of fluency. And that is when we have a vacant position in public safety, whether it be police or fire, those people are being recruited. So I know, as you indicated, when you had one of your meetings with the police officers that came back, and the note was put out that there are 6 positions that need to be filled. And in various periods of time, that is the case. That's another reason that I held off authorizing the hiring of those 2 officers so we got to the end of the fiscal year, because quite frankly, we were losing so many on the back end. Because when you say we have 2 open positions that need to be filled, and that's all good and well, we can fill them, but on the other side, we're losing public safety officers. When Ankeny is calling our officers and offering a given amount of money for them to go to work for them, they leave. I shared with you in the community that I was at, the city of Columbia, Missouri used to call our police chief, and this individual, perhaps departments in Iowa have the same thing. This man was charged solely with recruiting police officers. And he would call us on a regular basis and say, I want to know background on this officer. And by the way, I'm probably going to be calling you in 2 days to pick off more. We've heard, and you and I have talked about this as well, Councilman, and that is if cities like West Des Moines and Waukee are getting picked off officers, you can only imagine how arduous it is for cities like Marshalltown and Clinton and ours, quite frankly, to pick those up. So we can talk about the open positions, which is a valid concern. I'm not setting that aside, but bear in mind on the other end, there are also personnel that are leaving on the backside of these organizations that are leaving us, and then we struggle to fill those positions.
Right, and these, I was referring to the 2 positions that these officers had left for whatever reason.
That's
that
correct.
May be.
That's correct.
I show that there are 2 now that have left. 1 open position that we didn't fill. Is that correct, where we stand as of today? I kind of want to get where we're at today.
The 2 that you're referring to, that might be a little bit ahead of the game. We have 2 leaving very soon.
Yeah, and I haven't even entered those in. I don't know about the time that. It would really be easy if we could just square the circle here, because I've got 2 positions I just like.
We have 30, we're authorized 37.
Right.
And then we're getting the additional 38th, which was the funded position. And then I've been advised I can hire a 39th. So we'll have our sworn officers at 39.
This is where the council were confused. You can understand our confusion at first, because we're still here and not being able to figure out what we've got. I just want to know today, and just in a simple answer, how many positions do we have that are open as of today where officers have left for various reasons? Not the open position. Do we have any openings today where they've left or been asked to leave?
No, we've got 1 position that is someone is not working the street because of a personnel issue. You know that one.
I know that.
Okay, that's the only one. We've got all the others are filled,
Okay. That's
and
what I
then
was
we're going to bring on 2 more.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry about that intense
Let's,
question.
well, let's go to Victory and then we'll come back to Mark.
I guess I still feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect about the officer that wasn't hired after council suggested that we should hire that. We put that off in favor of the dispatchers. We were in a dire need there. I'm not pointing any fingers either, but I want to go over this a little bit more carefully. When council said that they wanted that position filled at the beginning of the year and it was budgeted for, there were financial considerations, and then it was Chief McAndrew's opportunity to say that we needed an officer or not. But I feel like there's kind of a communication issue here. I feel like with the challenges that are ahead of us, that are many and varied, some anticipated and many unexpected, with public safety being of primary importance, I sort of wonder when we were supposed to step in and say, hey, we said that we wanted to have an officer hired, and here we are in a dire situation in some cases, and that wouldn't have solved everything, but certainly, as other councilmen alluded to, it would have been a step in the right direction. So I just wonder, what wasn't clear about that from a council perspective, and when and how we should have stepped in and said, why isn't this officer being hired?
I'd like to speak to that, Mayor, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And I respect what Councilman Strebe said. I want to structure this argument without being argumentative. The impetus that I got from 3 of the council members were after representatives of the council. I might add, the members of the council, it's free country, you can meet with representatives of the police and fire union, and they've got back with me, and that's occurred more than a couple times. They've not contacted me, nor have they contacted Councilman Myers. But I do want to point out the issue of the overtime and the weekends that police officers don't get off, that don't have off, specifically with the police department, that came to the fore to me not long after the meetings were held with members of the police department. It's an administrative decision as to whether or not we hire or fire, let's just say for lack of a better term, or don't fill positions. And I'll take full responsibility for that. I still stick by the point that financially, although we did have you're going to see in a little bit, some of the storm clouds that are on the horizon, I feel that the city faces in the upcoming years. So if council does have certainly some angst and concern about that, the one thing I cannot promise Councilman Dalby, that number of trying to lock down specifically when there's open position, both Chief Miller and Chief McAndrew, they could leave here tonight and find out that they've lost 1 or 2. So it's a moving target in terms of what those positions are, quite frankly, that do need to be filled. And that's just a fact. I know you don't like that, but that's a matter of fact. As it relates to filling the positions, again, my position was to not fill that until we got to the end of the fiscal year. In my conversations with council, they were in accord with that. If that wasn't the case, then that responsibility falls to me.
Okay, Mark?
I want to touch back on something that Mr. Morris said. People could come and go at any given moment. Does the police department or the fire department or any other department, I guess, within the city have a game plan for attrition? Because it seems to be that if somebody's leaving, we have nothing on the back burner to take care of that issue.
Right, and I think to that point, though, Councilman, one of the items that it really needs to come, and I'm not deflecting, but in terms of expediting the civil service exam is an example. Expediting the process where we can hire more firefighters and more police officers. That's something that I would argue staff would be more than willing to visit with those elements of those respective unions as to how they feel we could expedite that process. But I'm not trying to be rudimentary, but we still go back to, your game plan is, what was as an example, what was our game plan when Ed Corton left? Some of you were not on the council. I don't have a statue over in the corner that I can flip a switch and that person steps in and takes that position. And I can't emphasize enough the difficulty of trying to fill public safety positions in an environment where not only more and more of the baby boomers are retiring, fewer and fewer are getting into, particularly with police and fire, that line of work. We could step up our recruiting efforts, and I know that was, I believe that's something that the police union has visited with some folks about stepping our recruiting efforts to do that. It is still going to be a challenge. I'll let the chief speak to that issue then of trying to find viable candidates.
I think Andy covered it as far as getting viable candidates. I think we're going to see during this process, we have very few applicants test with the city. Due to the time of year, that'll have a big part of it. Our pools are getting smaller. People are not wanting to be police officers anymore. It doesn't gain the respect that it used to. So we see a real big drop in the amount of people we have testing with us. I think I've sent some articles out to council about some of the departments are down 50 to 80% in their applicant pools that they have testing, and we're going to see the same thing. As far as you were talking about the attrition, we need to realize that when I have an officer I know is going to retire, if I want to have another officer that can step into his place the day that he retires, we've got to get him through the academy and the FTO program. I'm just ballparking $40,000 to $45,000 we would have in that officer. That would be in addition to our budget. So I would be really happy to be able to hire someone 6 months before another officer retired, so I could have him on his feet and ready to go. But we are talking it's going to be an additional cost above what's budgeted.
I recall a conversation. I don't remember exactly who it was that I had this conversation with, but there's a certain point in the recruitment process where we're not paying a salary up to a certain drop dead point where we take that person onto payroll. Is that correct? I mean, we're not paying for a police officer from the time the civil service list gets dropped until the time that they're on the street. Like they're going to the academy is when we start paying them. Is that correct?
The day that they become an employee of the city, we start paying them.
Which is where about the time they go to the academy, or
like in this process, we'll try to get them hired a week or two before the academy starts in January. The only thing that might cost us a little bit more is if they come in and they say, I'm also just testing with this department, this department, this department, and they're hiring next month. If we've got a couple good guys, if we only have like 2 on our list that we're going to hire, and we know that they're going to try and get on with another department, they're testing with everybody, we'll grab them.
Okay. So in short, though, if you know somebody's going to be retiring in 6 months, you could start the ball rolling 3 or 4 months before time, and the police department is still not out of salary because we wouldn't be to the point where we'd be paying their salary at that juncture anyway.
Sure. Yeah, we could start the testing process. You bet.
Okay. Thank
One
you.
other piece of information I think we need to get on the floor because it keeps coming up and a lot of people have been asking about it. Chief, we have 17 patrol officers right now on the streets.
We have 16, and then if we include our community service officer, Jeff Williams, we have 17.
And when we compare to other comparable cities, most of them are in the 20s. So I think the issue of whether it's 1, 2, or 3, we're certainly still behind our sister cities. And I think that's what you're referring to here, Matt, as I look at the list you have.
Yeah, that, and I think before we can even assess how many we need, we have to know how many we have. And I haven't seen that we've gotten to that point yet. Thank you.
Any other? Okay. Anything else you want to ask the chief or Andy? And when you get an officer, you said if we start somebody at 45,000 and then benefits and they go through the academy, what's the cost to the city for a on-the-street policeman starting out first year?
It's costing us about $80,000. It's a little bit more if they've got a family. That's a $10,000 difference in the insurance cost to the city.
Okay. Other questions? Other comments?
I have a comment. Getting to the bottom of all this and getting everything straight in our own minds has been very difficult for all of us, I think. But Andy, I think, alluded to the fact that council had a meeting with the police officers and the fire department. And then we were told that, the police department, somebody told them evidently that they shouldn't be meeting with us. And we don't feel that way, but we discovered the big, big problems that the police department's in that we had no idea about. And that that makes us look pretty bad. But we had no way of knowing that until these officers came forward and told us. And then we discovered that we had many officers that hadn't had a week off or a weekend off for 13, 15 weeks. To me, this is unacceptable. We're putting our officers' lives in jeopardy. It's very unsafe. They're burned out. They're tired. And in this day and age, we have young officers. They want a weekend off with their family. So we discovered this sort of by those folks coming forward and letting us know what they were faced with. So then we're working from here forward. And I just want to make it known that, that this didn't make us look very good. We had no knowledge of this. And evidently city administrator didn't either. But now we do. And we intend to attempt to fix it. That's my comment.
Victor? Speaking of attempting to fix it, in addition to hiring new officers, Chief, what are the hour structures for shifts now?
We have 3 shifts. They work 8-hour.
8-hour shifts?
8-hour shifts, yes.
So moving forward and considering the amount of overtime that these officers are putting in now, would it be possible to consider alternatives to that shift schedule to move to 12-hour shifts to possibly allow them to have a little bit more time off and maybe avoid some of the overtime that we're racking up now?
A 12-hour shift will cost us more money and more overtime.
It would cost you more money and more overtime.
Yes. If we want to get into that a little bit, I'm not against the 12-hour shift at all. If we compare to the other cities, our sister cities and their police departments, I've contacted every one of them. All of you should have the comparables list. I'm assuming that you have that. And if you look at those, most departments, like Muscatine, they have 22 patrol, Marshalltown, 24. We don't have that. We've got 16 plus our CSO. However, we're going to get 2 more, so we'll be at 19. But you have to have 4 different shifts, days and nights. You got to have, and we've got enough to put 4 officers on each of those shifts. Marshalltown, every other city that's got that, they've got 6 to 8 officers on each one of those shifts. So if we want to go to 12-hour shifts, I need to hire about 6 to 8 more people.
Okay, thank you.
Skip, I wanted to address you. I don't know of any officers that have missed gone 13 to 15 weeks without a weekend off. I find that hard to believe that anyone's gone that long. Maybe 2 weeks, maybe in a rare occurrence, a sergeant due to our current position where we have, we're down a couple, a 1 sergeant position. But yeah, that would not be accurate. The other thing is, I want to just note that on my budget that I submit, I've asked for personnel, I believe, every year since I've been chief, and I think Lieutenant Clark had also. So when we do our budgets each year, I've asked for additional personnel. The other thing is, it was alluded to that the union has been told not to talk to council members. This goes back a while back. I do not want employees contacting council members on day-to-day activities at the police department. It's not the council's position to be addressing personnel issues like discipline, where I can't share that information with you. Andy did a employee survey a year ago, and that was addressed. We've got procedures for personnel to file grievances with the city administrator, but there are steps for that. So that is true that officers are not allowed to contact individual city council members on day-to-day activities at the police department. That's just basically, we have a chain of personnel. We're a paramilitary organization, and we have a chain of command. There are other instances where they can contact Joni or go directly to the city administrator over my head for specific instances, but they are not allowed to contact council and talk to them about daily activities. And I can clarify any of that if that spawned any more questions or anything.
Mayor, I'd like to be on the record that, Chief, I agree with you, and I think there should be a chain of command. Maybe that's why I wasn't contacted. Maybe it's because my term is up at the end of December, but I agree with you 100% that officers, first of all, need to follow your chain of command.
I too agree with the chain of command. I absolutely. I used to work here. I know what the chain of command means. I truly agree with that. But we would have never known this if this hadn't came up.
Mm-hmm. Well, I talked to the union prior to them contacting you also and told them that this was the type of issue that they could contact the council about because they're talking about their safety and numbers of personnel. So I think that was appropriate for them to contact city council, and that's why I said you do whatever you want to do. I'm not going to get your way or keep you from doing it. I have no problem with that. I think it's good. Look what it's turned out here. We've got a lot of people interested in what's going on. But what I was getting at is, again, the chain of command and day-to-day activities of the police department is not anything to be brought to the council.
I can understand that.
Your Honor, I want to respond to that. I just want to make sure we're clear. When we had this meeting, and as far as that goes, that's police and fire both, for me anyway, just to let you know that we don't have very many conversations, if any at all, that I even recall about day-to-day activities. So I don't want you to think that employees are coming to us with it. We're missing a box of pens, or we'd like a new chair for the office. That doesn't. I've never had that happen.
I haven't either.
But the hard part for a council, and I think everybody has to understand this, is our main job is number one, public safety, and number two, finances and budget. And of course, I respect chain of command. I don't think I've ever had an issue with a disciplinary action or a termination or anything of that sort in the past. I don't even get involved in that. I've never even been made aware of it, that it's an issue. And I wouldn't. That's your lane. But we have different lanes here, and the council has to approve not only the budget, which includes a personnel and a staffing list of how many employees we have, but we basically have to approve everything. And there are things that we have to make sure that you stay in your lane, we stay in our lane as a council. But what we're trying to say is when we approve things like the budget, which directly affects personnel and how many we have, like you said, it's a safety issue. I feel that it's a council's job, if there's an issue, like you had just said, and I agree with you 100%, that was a legitimate thing to come to the council with. And I want you to know that's the only issues that really, to me, have been brought to my attention, are safety issues, numbers, and personnel issues with both police and fire. And I totally have no problem with that. But I do respect your position, and I wouldn't want any party of the disciplinary procedures of the city. So they have a chain of command in their own union for that too as well. So, and I'm aware of that. I'm in one, so I would respect that. Just wanted you to know that. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other comments about police, or any comments or any questions for the chief?
Are we done with our discussion, Your Honor, with the police then?
I think I'd like to, Andy, do you have one more comment?
Well, no, just that, don't forget the fire department is.
Yeah, I was going to say at this point, I'd like to invite you to introduce Chief Miller.
Well, actually, I need to give the overview, and then I'll introduce it as we talked about. If you would, Matt, go ahead and call these up. These figures are spread apart a little bit better, but still relatively hard to read. I want to start off by discussing the city's financial condition and put this in perspective again with what our personnel costs are. The chart that you see up there indicates the probable effects of property tax rollback. And I know that's something the legislature has spoken about in great detail. All items being equal, and I know the mayor serves on one of the Iowa League of Cities commissions. The preponderance of evidence is that the legislature is probably going to be, if not scaling that back, at a maximum eliminating that. And when they do, and I think that's more of a certainty than a probability, this chart that you see up there, and again, I apologize, you can't read it quite as well, but if you look at the sheets in front of you, you'll see with a 95% reduction, the total is $526,335. Let's just concentrate on the general fund, because this really is specific to the general fund. So if you look at that very first year, if a 95% reduction, that's $242,044. The next year, if that goes, that's a 95, the next year or 2 years, whenever it takes place next, that amount of money that will not be coming into the general fund is $245,783. I'm not a budget expert on the state level. It does go without saying when the governor is having it dipped into the reserves, $131 million. That's not a good path to walk down. There are challenges there. So if you look at, and the item obviously we're going to be discussing tonight are the 3 firefighter positions which are in the budget. And my recommendation to council was and remains today to not fill those positions for financial reasons. If we were to hire 3 firefighters with insurance, that's approximately $230,000. As you can see, that $230,000 is morphed by the amount of money that we're going to lose in the first year and the following year, I would argue, when we get to 254 in 1 year. Still, that is something that you're going to see that's going to have an effect on the general fund. If you would go to the next slide, please. The next slide lists, in my opinion, probably the most important element for all of us to bear in mind. In Iowa, in the state of Iowa, and for most cities in their general fund, we constitute the lion's share of our revenue is from property taxes. Approximately 37.7% of the revenue that flows into the general fund is from property tax, not sales tax, not use tax. And as you know, the other funds like engineering has are siloed, but that constitutes a fairly significant part of our budget, nearly 40%. I know you can't read it probably as well, but if you look at that, at the top chart where it lists assessed valuations, and that goes down from 2013 to 2017, over a 5-year period, that assessed valuation has grown 1.16%. Now again, nearly 40% of our budget. Drop to the next line down and you'll see salaries and fringe benefits. That is growing over the 5-year period at 12.67%. 12.67%, again, our salaries are increasing in the general fund, not just police and fire, but increasing in the general fund over a 5-year period, 12.6%, while what constitutes a large share of the budget in the general fund is growing at a mere 1.16%. If you would go to the next slide, please. The next item that you will see, and Bob J. covered this is our, you will note our fund balance and what I would call our coverage ratio. That's the amount of money that the city, quite frankly, has in its corpus on the sidelines. It's, I guess if you wanted to, from a percentage basis, you could call it the rainy day fund. The Government Finance Officers Association recommend that that percentage be somewhere between 15 and 25%, in that range. As you can see, and I won't go through all of these verses in scripture, I will point out though, when you look at ours is 23.23%. So we're at the high end. You look at some of the other cities out there in terms of the amount of money that they have in their reserves. Clinton, as an example, 14.74%. My point on this is even if you look at 23% and Marshalltown is almost 26%, well, before you break out the Aste Spumante, just remember something in mind. We are a city that we bond during the fiscal year, usually once, if not twice. So we're borrowing to pay for, in some instances, capital expenses. You may recall the asbestos remediation work we had to do. So we're borrowing money during the fiscal year. So that's why when Bob talked about the bond monies that's in reserve, it would be analogous to you going out and saying, I'm going to go to the mall this weekend up in Des Moines. I need $500. I've only got $250. I'm going to borrow the other $250 and I'm going to pay it back. Those funds have to be paid back. That percent, I would argue, is very, very healthy. Quite frankly, I was a little surprised that it was at that particular level. Next slide, please. The next one, because council have asked me about some of the comparisons, contrast between overtime in police and fire. As you will note, and it's difficult, well, you can read that a little bit better, but if you will note, the net police overtime is approximately $611,927.64. You contrast that with the fire department, which is at the extreme right of that page. That's $151,000. So the delta, the amount of money in overtime that you're seeing with the police department, comparing again to the fire department, the police department exceeds that by almost $460,000. They have more overtime. Next slide, please. The next item that you will note, these are, and I'm just going to cover two of these. I think council knows this and most people realize salaries and benefits constitute the most, as I would say, the lion's share of our expenditures. And as you can see from the statistics that are listed, and again, this is specific to the general fund, you've got salaries and benefits there at the very bottom, 71.65%. I think what is of note, the very top column, if you can read that, that's specific to the police department. That percent is 88.29. The fire department is 94.84. I think if you look at percentages with fire departments anyway, that's usually in the norm. You're usually in the low 90s. But I think it's important to put in perspective the amounts of money then that we're expending on salaries and benefits. Next slide, please. The next one you will note is just a repeat of what I just indicated, where you see the police at 88.9%, the fire department 94.84. Next slide, please. This is in addition to and you're not going to see this, it's difficult to read, and certainly we'll pass out copies of this, but this, I think, speaks in ringing tones to the financial challenges facing the city. I just shared with you, you've got 37% of our revenue that is created by property taxes. So you got almost 40%. Your assessed valuation, which is what drives that, is growing at 1.16%. And then you have salaries and benefits growing at a much higher clip. The item I would like to point out to you on this particular chart, and I think it's worth noting, this is a list of, well, you can see it's only the first page. What's that? Yeah, the top 20. Out of 945 communities, if you look up there, and I realize you can't see it, our tax rate, $21.44 per $1,000 of assessed valuation. We are the 7th highest in the state. When you look at the cities that are around us, Bob will usually pick the usual suspects, Clinton, Fort Dodge, Burlington. Our property tax rate is higher than certainly all of those. Fort Dodge is somewhat close by. We're competing against cities like Pella. I think theirs is $12 and change. But that's something that, quite frankly, surprised me, that our property tax levy was going to be that high. And perhaps Bob can speak a little bit to the reason, justification for that. I'm going to finish up here in just a moment. Next slide, please. This next one goes back to the issue of assessed valuation. I'm going to ask in just a second, I'm going to ask Bob J. to come and speak to this. I just want to point out one item here. When you look at the assessed valuation, and that is the middle, the widest column where it says taxable property valuations, we are the 3rd lowest. You have an average of 1.06 billion. We're 39% less than the average of the communities that are on there. At this point, Mr. Mayor, I'd like Bob J. to come forward and provide a little bit more background on that piece of information.
Go ahead, Bob.
Thank you, Your Honor. Like I said, this is just you've got a copy of it. And what we took was information that was supplied by the police department and the firefighters. We're looking at, because of the information that was supplied, we did not interpret or project anything out that wasn't there. We were given total officers by the police, and we were given firefighters by shift. So we retained that information. The interesting thing is that you'll see a comparison of the square mileage of the city, how large the city is, and the number of officers and firefighters that are there. So we have 17 officers, 9 firefighters per shift, what we want to have. We have 16.53 square miles of city to be going through. Bettendorf has 21 police patrol officers and 8 firefighters with a square mileage of 22.36, so larger city overall. But the thing that, there's none of us that wouldn't, I'd love to have 50 more officers. I'd love to have 50 more firefighters on board. It'd be the greatest thing in the world. But we have to deal with the realities. And the realities here is that these cities that are brought up as comparables, we're nowhere in the ballpark as far as assessed valuation. Clear to the right, if we had the assessed valuation in Mason City, we'd be looking at $3.383 million additional in the general fund on its own. Muscatine, $1.660 million. Burlington, $451,000 additional money in the general fund. Clinton, $2,704,000 in the general fund. Fort Dodge, $285,000 in the general fund. Bettendorf, $12,326,000. Cedar Falls, $7,919,000. Marshalltown, $1,296,000. The thing that we're fighting here is the fact that we have such a low valuation. We have such a high tax rate. And there just isn't enough money to go along and have everything that everybody wants. I'd love to have that. But that's just not an opportunity in the real world.
If I may, the last item I would like to address Mr. Mayor and Council before I would like to introduce Chief Miller. And to that point, I think we have to address the item at hand, and that is the number of cities and their fire departments and their staffing levels. And I've shared that with you, and I don't have that list in front of me, where you've got, I think the top 4 of them have 13 per shift. Ours is at present 9 per shift. There are 3 cities that have less than that run 8, 8, and 8. I'll get that list to council and certainly share that with the public as well. We'll get that. I do want to point out, though, this is an area the city has been to before, regardless of the concern of the 9-person crews. If you go back to 2010, 2011, and 2012, and you average those per shift, we had 9.37 then. In fact, if you look at them in 2010, you had 9.56. You had 9 per shift in 2011. That goes to 9.5 in 2012. And I think, again, that speaks to the fact that that is something the fire department has operated in under before, and all we're asking is, in the current financial environment that we're in, we stay at that 9 per shift for financial reasons. Chief Miller has been very good to work with in this. He's an honorable man. He and I happen to have a disagreement, perhaps, of what constitutes full staffing. The one item I think I can say we are on accord in, and that is, if the city were to make the decision to hire these, quite frankly, additional firemen, and so you can have even crews, we're not talking about 9, 10, and 9. You've got to have, quite frankly, equal footing. And the one item the chief, I think he and I agree on, is the fact that symmetry, if we're going to hire someone, and if our financial condition doesn't improve, we're going to turn around and fire that person or let them go, that's an exercise in futility. Mr. Mayor and Council, unless you have any other questions, I would ask, Mayor, that you turn the microphone over to Chief Miller at this time.
Okay. Good evening, Chief. We'll recognize you, and you have the microphone.
Thank you, Council. Thank you, Mayor. We're going to go back a few years. We're going to go back about 30 years. 30 years and 72 days ago, I was a firefighter with Tumble Fire Department, and I got my layoff letter from the city. So the things I'm going to tell you right now, I've been through. I've actually been through them. So I'm going to speak from the heart and then tell you some things that's going on here. So let's go. January 7th of this year, we lost 2 firefighters on the same day. One firefighter retired on a retirement. Another firefighter went to another department. Last week, August 17th, we lost a 3rd firefighter. We're down 3 crew right now. January 31st, we're going to have one of our assistant chiefs, who, by the way, is the most senior employee in the city, is going to be retiring. We're going to be down 4 positions. When you start talking about cutting staff, you know, that's a real issue. The Tumble Fire Department is outstanding. They do a fantastic job. They are a 3 rating right now. We keep talking about comparable cities to the city of Ottumwa. We got our comparable cities that does not have a 3 ISO rating like we do. That's one issue. A couple other things. If we cut the staffing down, can ISO come in and do your reevaluation? They not only can, they probably will, because ISO is based on that's what they base your insurance premiums on. There's 9% of the fire departments in the United States. The Tumble Fire Department is in that top 9% by their ISO rating. And that's very, very good. That took a lot of work. In 2010, we was a 5. In 2011, we went to a 4. And then last year, or 2 years ago, we went to a 3. And that wasn't just a fire department issue. That was police department dispatch. That was Ottumwa Water Works and our Ottumwa fire guys. They got it done. They did a lot of stuff they had to do to get that down. And like I said, they're top 9% fire department in the whole state and in the whole country. Not a lot of departments can say that. So we should take pride in that. House fires. Ottumwa is notoriously one of the top departments in the entire state of Iowa with the number of house fires. 3 years ago, we were the #1 fire department in the state, or 4 years ago, it was the #1 department in the state by the amount of house fires. 3 years ago, we were #1 in the state in the amount of house fires. 2 years ago, that number dropped down. Last year, we had 32 structure fires. This year, we've had our 36th structure fire already, and we have 4 months to go in the year. Chances are we're going to be in the 50 range, maybe in the 60 range. When you have fires like we have, and you can go back and give you guys the reports from the last 15 or 20 years, it doesn't change. We are notorious for structure fires. To have all these structure fires, you have to have firefighters to put the fires out. I'm going to go back a little bit and talk about our guys that are gone and how do we plan on replacing these guys. We have a current list right now that expires middle of next year. We have about 5 or 6 people on the list. To hire these 3 people, we could start the process tomorrow and get these people hired probably within the next month or month and a half. We've planned on the future, on what we're going to do, and we lose additional personnel. So we try to keep a current list. Unfortunately, we're not like the police department, and I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't want them problems. I would never want to have to deal with that stuff. But we're pretty fortunate. We keep a current list. When our list expires, we get a new list. We get a new promotional list, because when Assistant Chief Trout retires, we're going to have to promote an assistant chief, a captain. So we'll have to move that up the ranks there. Like I said, your initial response on fires, it's always the first 2 months of a fire is your critical time. It's going to take us a little bit to get on scene. And by the time we get on scene, we got to get stuff done if there's people in the house, because Ottumwa Fire Department, right or wrong, is notorious around the state as being active firefighters and going in houses and searching for people. Now, do we save everybody? Obviously, we do not, but we give it our 100% to try to get that done. CERG, another thing we do is a lot of people don't know is we cover 9 counties for hazmat. This is a 2080 agreement that we had signed. We was one of the very first fire departments in the state of Iowa that had a regional hazmat team. To this day, we have 9 counties that we cover in southern Iowa. When they call and have incidents, they're going to want people to respond. So that's another issue we're going to have on CERG. If we drop the manpower, what are we going to do? Because the counties will be coming to me and say, okay, what are we going to do here? We got a situation. Comparable cities where we rank, like I said, ISO, we're right there. When it comes to manpower, when it comes to budgets, equipment, we're pretty much on the low. The 8 states that we compare with, we're about last on about most of the things we compare with. And that doesn't seem like it's going to change anytime soon. We have lost positions. In 2010, I was put in this position as interim fire chief, which I became the fire chief. But at the time that right before I was put in this position, we lost a 40-hour position. We had 2 deputy chiefs at the time, and we had a fire chief. When we lost that deputy chief position, the job never changed. Them work, that work got divvied up between the deputy chief and the assistant chiefs, because it's not going to go away. We've never had an administrative assistant. I'm not complaining about that, but I'm just stating the fact that we've never had many. And so that stuff, anytime we do a report, and last year we run 3,500 calls, so we do a lot of reports and paperwork and all that stuff. A lot of stuff we do for the public. Matt, you did right time with us yesterday. Yesterday we was at the airport for 3 hours in the morning. Now, why was we at the airport? Because I think, and since I've been in this position, I think it's very important that we help the city departments like we help them. We do the Jimmy Jones Shelter House almost every single weekend. We help the water pollution control. We burn off fields for them so they don't have a situation down there. And I can go on and on and on about what we do to help these other fire departments out. And if you guys want a list of them, I'll be more than happy to provide that. But we're not just a fire department. We're a city group that does whatever we can to assist all the other departments. I would almost guess that we probably do more for the other departments than the other departments do combined. Information. This is my little file I've had since January 7th. The city administrator and I have had numerous conversations. The city council members and I have had numerous conversations. This is my file that I've acquired in the last 8 months on information I've gave on what's the good and the bad of going to reducing our department. So if you guys want to look at that, I'll be more than happy to share that. That's where it's at right now. Like I said, we're on a pace, a record pace we're just on a record pace. I think right now at this time, with what we do as a fire department, the amount of calls we have, it'd be a real shame to reduce our department manning staff right now. Because if history means anything, and it does to me, our fire calls are not going to change. They're going to stay at least in the 40 to 50 range, and that's just how it is. I'd like to have a better explanation why it's like that, but I can't do that. You know, we have other programs we do to help the public. We do fire smoke alarm installs. We go to all the schools, kindergarten, second grade, sixth grade. We do fire prevention week, and we do all this stuff. We've even been down here we've washed the city hall windows one time because it needed done. So I think the council needs to take a serious look at our fire department. You guys have got an absolutely fantastic fire department. I'm very proud of them. I've been in this position 7 years, and they make my job easy because I might mention something out there, and they take heart to it, and they get it done. The way I run the fire department, is I'm going to do best what's for the fire department. To me, it's a very simple concept. You do what you can to make the city better and make the fire department better. I gave a lot of thought to this. I'm going to have to read this off because I don't want to miss anything on this. I know the council has a difficult decision to make regarding public safety, and my suggestion is very easy. You need to do what is best for the public safety of the city, period. And that's the way I look at it. You got to do what's best for the public safety, and that's not just fire department. I mean, our brother policemen also. You know, they're in a bind, and I hope it gets fixed. But that's the way I look at it. I know that September 5th we're going to have a pretty serious vote, and I literally was on the phone all day today. I had people call me all day. One time I had 2 calls. My cell phone was going off, and I had 2 calls. People wanting to talk about public safety. So here's where we are. I mean, you know my opinion, you know my feelings. I might be on my sleeve here, but that's just the way I do business. So if anybody has any questions about the fire department, I would be more than happy to answer them.
Okay, Victor?
Not a question, Chief. Just like to make some comments, and I hope I remember everything that I want to say as well. But when I ran for council, I vowed to support public safety, and I haven't wavered from that vow. And we were told, you know, that this was going to be a discussion about the upcoming budget and to bring our ideas about what our priorities are to the table. And as Councilman Dalby alluded, at the top of that list is public safety. You know, if we don't have a safe city and if our citizens don't feel safe, then the bullet point about property taxes driving our revenue, that could possibly decrease if it's perceived that we don't have a safe city to move to. We can talk about jobs, we can talk about housing, those are important things. But this is a connect the dots issue. If we don't have a safe city, then people aren't going to want to move here and they aren't going to want to work here. So public safety is a priority, and I am in favor of hiring more firefighters and more policemen. And so I'm opposed to that recommendation. I understand the financial figures, but you know, I think that there are ways that we need to really take a deep look at this and consider what's best for our citizens. And public safety, again, is at the very top of the list. With that said, I'd like to point out that I feel like there's been a little bit of misinformation given to the public. To this point, publicly or privately, myself or neither of the council up here in the year and 8 months that I've been here have made any decision that has cut public safety. We have not eliminated any positions. We have not cut funding for those positions. There's a difference between cutting public safety and not having the financial resources to have fully staffed departments, okay? So I think that we're sort of misinforming the public when we talk about cutting public safety or that council isn't in favor of that when no decision on that has been made. So for the record, I am for increasing the number of firefighters and police officers and bolstering our public safety departments in the upcoming year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Victor. Mark?
Yeah, I prepared a few words tonight because I think that to go along with what Councilman Strebe had said, you know, there's been a little bit of a misconception, at least from the public level, about what's been going on. So to start off with, you know, I stood right alongside Councilman Strebe when we were making our promises to the public, and public safety was at the top of that list, both of us. So, you know, without public safety, we don't have a community. And I think Councilman Strebe wrapped that up pretty well. But I want to give a little bit of a timeline about what has happened to this point, at least from a council perspective. So everybody from the community knows what has been going on and what communications we have had. We were aware of an issue with the fire department for probably about a year or better now, that there were officers that were not on staff. We were confronted by the firefighters union. Confronted's a terrible word, I apologize. But we were brought aware of the issue by the firefighters union about a year ago. And at that point, Councilman Dalby and I specifically had mentioned that, you know, we know that a city administrator and city staff are in the middle of doing a staffing analysis, and bear with us. We want to wait to see what that staffing analysis brings. And the firefighters, Local 395, they accepted that. They said, you know, we'll be patient, we'll wait through it. Fast forward a few months, the situation got a little bit more urgent, and Councilman Dalby and myself again met with not only representatives from the union, but we actually met with the entire fire department. And again, you know, there were other things that were discussed as well, but we had reiterated the fact that, you know, please be patient with us. We are awaiting the staffing analysis before we say anything. And again, probably a little bit begrudgingly at that point, the fire department was patient. They worked with us. And then fast forward a little bit longer, and the fire department union reached out to us again. And this time, I think they had met with most of the fire or the city council at that point. This time, Councilman Strebe and I met with them, and we again mentioned, you know, at that point we heard that the staffing analysis was done. However, we hadn't seen it, but, you know, please give us time to absorb that, and we can have some healthy discussion. Now, unfortunately, number one, we haven't seen the results of that staffing analysis for that or the police department. I understand that the one for the police department is done as well, but we haven't seen it. During that time frame, I wanted to do my own research on what was going on with the police and fire departments. I had contacted pretty much everybody. I informed the union, the fire department union, that I was doing that research. I contacted you, Chief Miller, and you and I had a couple discussions. I contacted Chief McAndrew. I contacted members of the city staff to see what was going on, at least some in a fashion that my mind could absorb. Unfortunately, we learned during that time the police department was having some issues, and this was the first time in, I guess, 20 years that the police department union had come forward to discuss an issue with the city council. We were informed of a severe shortage, and again, for historical reference, I want to point back to what we had discussed with Chief McAndrew, and that the council, when we flipped the switch on the dispatch positions last year, the council in full discussed the point that we wanted to make sure that that police officer position was put back in the budget. And then again, when we discussed the budget, we said we wanted that police officer kept in the budget, which it was. Unfortunately, it took until the last 3 weeks for the approval for that position, and now we're in a position we are. And we find out that the police department has over $160,000 in overtime that is causing people to not spend time with their families, and in my mind, creating a safety issue in and of itself. So there've been a lot of rumors circulating around what's brought us to this point, and I want to be really clear on this. We as a council have been extremely active over the last couple of months to try to resolve these situations. We have been in constant communications with staff about it. And me personally, I'm not going to sit here and stand idle while our officers are put in dangerous situations with little to no backup. I don't care whether we're talking about police officers or fire officers. It really makes no difference to me. They have no recuperation time, and the feeling that they have little to no support for the council, that's really disturbing to me. Emergency calls to both departments have increased from 2013 to today, much as Chief Miller just alluded to. And the staffing has remained stagnant at best during that time. Both departments have the ability to generate revenue. I've discussed this with staff, with Chief Miller, with Chief McAndrew, but the staffing levels make it the ability to do that virtually impossible at this point. We have little presence at our airport right now that the businesses out there are paying for in their property taxes, because we physically don't have the staffing levels to go out there. Our officers are placed in questionable situations where either they do their jobs or follow protocol because there's no backup immediately available. Meanwhile, we have injured and active duty officers that are away from their jobs, compounding the already fragile departments. And to go back to the what seems to be the meat of the problem, which is finances, I think that I can say pretty soundly from all of the council perspective, we're very intimately aware of the financial position we're in as a community. And we do have to be cautious looking ahead. It would be foolhardy of us to think that, you know, everything's going to be rosy going forward. And we know that we have property tax rollbacks coming, and that's not a question. And if we can't manage our funds in an appropriate manner, then we're going to have additional problems that we're going to have to deal with in interest rates, ISO ratings, things like that. However, again, I think I can speak for everybody up here when I say that we need to caution everyone against hedging future shortfalls in budget and cash, again, on the backs of the officers that are sitting out here today. Those are consequences that me personally, I'm not willing to stake my legacy on the city council on. I don't want to see someone get hurt. I don't want to see somebody potentially killed because we made the decision not to hire officers. If we have to make cuts in other areas, then we make cuts in other areas. We should be in the business of making sure our community's safe before we make sure we have $5,000 to throw at pet projects. Everything beyond public safety should be a luxury, I guess is what I'm saying. And I got to say, from a practical point of view, I'm a little bit taken back as to why we've been put in this position in the first place. We've been told that the money in the budget was, we didn't have money in the budget and there'd be a deficit. Yet some of these budgets were, or some of these positions were already in the budget to begin with. It wasn't until we asked about the statistical differences between budgeted heads and actual heads that we found this information out. We asked about staffing timelines for the police department and found out that we don't even have a current civil service list to select candidates from. Yet another issue. And then we find out that even if we do hire somebody, it's going to be a certain point down the road before we actually start paying cash for them. Yet we don't have an attrition plan in place to make sure that we can backfill those positions. And I would say the same thing for the fire department. we've been asked, or we have asked about the ISO rating of the city. We understand that there's a potential for the ISO rating to be reduced. However, we've never been given a definitive answer on what the real effect of that would be, whether we stayed with 10-man crews or went to 9-man crews. We still don't have any information for that. So I know that was rather long-winded, but again, at least from my point of view, I think that I can say that this council is going to work to bring solid resolution to this situation. I don't suspect that it's going to be the solution that anybody's going to be 100% happy with given our financial position, but it's something that we have to do. We can't sit here and just say, 3 years from now, we're going to have a problem, so we can't do anything about it right now. That is absolutely the most incorrect answer that we as a city council or staff can give. Thank you.
Mayor, can I make a couple comments on that? Mark, you're right on a lot of stuff you said. There's a couple things that we respond to the airport. We respond to fires and medical calls out there with Wapello County. The ISO rating, I've called ISO to say, if we go about drop from 10-person crews down to 9-person crews, how's this going to affect you? They will not tell you how it's going to affect you. When they'll tell you when it's going to affect you is when they come back and do a reevaluation. Then you're going to find out.
Okay.
Could I ask Tony something though?
Certainly. Go ahead, Councilman Myers.
Yeah. Okay. And I don't want this to be my regular time. It's just a question. But Tony, when you mentioned they won't give you a definitive answer, and I understand, but at the same time, I guess I'm curious and very appreciative of how you got that rating from a 5 to a 4 to a 3. But
Bob, that wasn't just me. That was a police department.
I understand
big
that.
waterworks, and our fire guys they worked their tails off to get that.
Well, I'd like to say it might have been some of the city councils I've worked with too, because we did help get the $1 million fire truck. We did help get the smaller trucks. We did help improve both. But my point is, Tony, so isn't there any indication of how you got it dropped to a 3? Was it because of the aerial truck? Was it because of the smaller trucks? Was it because of the equipment that we try to provide? What do they base on it?
That's a great question, and I can go back to the 2011 evaluation, the 2014 evaluation, and I can tell you exactly what the changes was. The changes, we had one of the biggest changes of all was our fire safety program.
Okay.
Police dispatch made some changes, which was a big addition. Waterworks added new water lines, which is a big addition. So it's a combination of it's 40, 40, 30 is how they split this ISO score up. The 3 departments will share it, and it comes up to 100%. And I can go back and read, I can go back to 1954 evaluation and tell you what the difference was. And then I've got 4 evaluations I've found through all the history of the fire department. And I can go back and tell you exactly in the last 5 years what the change was. But I can tell you that fire safety was the biggest one of all.
Yeah. No, and I know, Tony, because you guys, the fire hydrants, that was a part of it. But I guess my question to you is your best guess, hate to say guess, but whether we're 10 or 9, with all the other things that all these entities have done to work together, wouldn't we possibly maintain the 3?
That's a possibility. Okay. I can't say for sure, but yeah, that's a possibility.
And I understand it. Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from council members?
Yes, Your Honor, I got a question.
Go ahead, Matt.
And a comment, but I can do them separately or together, either one. And it goes to both aspects of public safety. We hear a lot about, our guys being picked off by other departments. And, if I was a young officer or a young firefighter, I'd want to go to where there's money. That's what we do. We make a living to support our families, period. And I think we're not in a position, as Bob has pointed out, and Andy's made very clear, in a financial position to try to compete with those salaries. So we're here stuck with what we have. But if you really think about it, when is the last time we've ever kept a fully staffed fire or police department without some guys being taken away or choosing to leave? You remember a solid year straight or 2. Has it been a while, or is that something that we've just seen in the last year?
In the last year, we've lost 3. We've lost 2 positions to other departments, 1 to a retirement. 2 years ago, we lost, I think, 2 positions. But we got an odd situation with the fire department. The money wasn't the big issue why 3 of our guys left. Their girlfriends had lived in other cities. That's why they left.
Sure.
That's what they told us anyway. So
I understand that too. I would not hold that against them.
So we're kind of a little odd on that one.
But we do have that turnover period. That's just what we have now to deal with. And the point I'm getting at is, we're pulling out all the stops on saying why financially we're not going to be able to. And there are huge challenges. And thank goodness Bob brings those to our attention. And I'm darn glad he does. Because I campaigned on the multi-residential rollback. It was going away. We were going to see some devastating revenue losses to the city. That was 4 years ago. I'm fully aware of that. I've read the bill. I've read our budget. But when we pull out all the stops on hiring a fully staffed fire department or, getting our officers in position, we, don't take into account that we lose officers. We lose firefighters. So if something catastrophic happens, we're usually not going to be fully staffed anyway. That's just the nature this business has come to now, especially for our area. So I just want to make that point that we may freak out when we say, oh, we can't afford 32 firefighter and we can't afford 38 officers. Well, we're never really at that point. So let's keep that in mind too. There are savings there. Since January, we haven't paid salaried positions for how many people?
2. Since January 7th, we lost 2 guys January 7th. Then positions have been
and that money is set aside in the budget to be paid as there would be warm bodies in those positions.
Yes.
There's savings there too. It's not the end of the game if we choose to staff fully our 2 departments. I just want to make that point to the public.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other comments? We have some people that wanted to comment to us.
Excuse me, Mayor. Yeah, if Skip isn't wanting to, my other was just a question. Now I would like to make a couple
Well,
comments.
just a comment. I too, like the rest of us here, vowed when we ran for office 3.5 years ago that we'd do everything possible to keep public safety where it should be. I too made that vow. I just wanted you to know that. The big problem in Ottumwa, and I think Andy alluded to it and probably Bob did too, unless maybe they did and I didn't hear it, but in Ottumwa, 74% of our homes are valued at under $100,000. In the sister cities, Mason, Andy named them, I won't name them again. In the sister cities, it's down to 30 to 40%. So what's that tell you? That tells you that Ottumwa's tax base, like Andy talked about and Bob talked about, we don't have the tax base. But that doesn't take away from the fact that we don't have less crime because of that. And we need to keep our public safety where it should be. We need to strive, and we're starting that process, getting rid of some of the derelict houses in town and trying to build our tax base by building new homes or encouraging people to build new homes. Get those places back on the tax rolls and build our tax base. That's the only way we're ever going to come out of this. And I agree with what Matt just said, Strebe, Mark, and I'm good to go. Thank you.
Okay. Bob?
Yeah, okay, thank you. Well, there's no question that public safety, that every person that runs for council, that isn't number one. It concerns me a little bit, though, that just that term then gets us into real political types of situations. I'm curious, and I was also appreciative of Bob and Andy pointing out from property tax, when you take in 1.9 and general fund, you pay out 12 point something. It's going to catch up to you eventually. So you do have to go back and look at hard questions. Back to the political side of it, the 3 terms I ran, I think I was endorsed by the fire department once. And maybe they think that was a mistake. I don't know. But I say to you, Tony, as I did, I would hope in those 12 years, the types of things I identified that other councils tried to work with fire department, improve public safety and everything, that we made a difference in some ways. But I also guess, without it being political, I would say, no department shouldn't look at, after 50 years, after whatever, what's been done in the past. Is there ways, are there things that could be done to be different, to be more efficient, to be just as safe, and that type of thing. So I hope you're careful. And the reason I say that, I also agree with Mark in 2 ways. I really like the idea, as a council person, that finally we had a city administrator that was looking at a staffing analysis. And that staffing analysis, as I understood it, was not, okay, how can we cut people? it was supposed to have been both ways. Are there departments that need more? Are there departments that are okay? Are there departments that we could get by with less? So I really was 100% behind that. I still am. But I also agree with Mark. I kind of wish we'd seen some of those results by now. But by that being said, I also wonder, this delegation here, everybody here, if it wasn't political, if it wasn't because there's an upcoming election, why wouldn't this type of discussion come out after the analysis is presented, as opposed to before we ever even know what it is? So, and then two other questions, Tony, real quick. You mentioned HAZMAT 9 County. Isn't there funding that goes into our participating in that?
That is funded by the 9 counties. City of Ottumwa provides the building, and the counties pay all the costs on the building. There's a fee for the guys receive a salary for that. Some of the guys receive a salary for that. That's covered by a board of directors from the supervisors.
Yeah. So
but you still have to have the manpower. When they have a
Yeah.
situation, you better have the manpower to go, or that's going to be a real problem.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And then the other one was on the number of calls, 3,400 so far and so forth. But I get this question asked quite often. Is it a state law that a fire truck, small truck, whoever, big truck, that when an ambulance is called, that a fire truck has to be called, or how do you determine? Because after the fact, you do get to call that as a call, don't you?
Do you mean, is it a state law that a fire truck has to respond with an ambulance?
Yes.
That's not a state law.
Okay. But we do it, I understand.
We do it because I can go back and tell you how many lives have been saved
Yeah.
by us running that medical calls.
Yeah.
And it's not more than 10 or 20. It's a high number.
So that decision was made just on the fact that you never know whether it's a large person that 2-person ambulance crew can't handle. You're there, you never know.
Dispatch does an absolutely fantastic job of telling us what we have, and normally when we get there, occasionally we'll have a blip in the system that nobody knows about until you get on scene. Because sometimes you get dispatched to this and you get on scene, it's something completely different, but nobody's going to know what it is until you get on scene.
Okay. So again, I guess I agree 100%, but do I question whether we can sit with you and look at whether changes could be made that would be effective and yet still offer the wonderful service you do? I think those discussions should be held.
Bob, you know my door has been open since I've been in that position for 7 years.
And I do appreciate that. Thanks.
Okay, I think are there any other final comments up here? We have several people, and I'd like to give them the opportunity to share their thoughts with us. And we are going to keep you to a 3-minute time limit so we get through these. Drew Skinner. Okay, thank you. Is it Doug Nees? Nyes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Appreciate your time this evening. My name is Doug Nyes. I'm president of the Iowa Professional Firefighters. I'm here to speak in opposition to the reduction of staffing for the fire department. I appreciate the comments about, it sounds like support for the staffing. That does mean a lot to us. And I just want to offer a few things to you in addition to what the chief talked about. For us, time is life, okay? And there are numerous studies out there that show the quicker we get there on scene, the quicker we are able to perform our operations, the more lives we can save. The way those jobs get done is through people. Fires are the same. They're very hard. They're difficult work. It takes people to do the work. Fire loads today in many houses are burn at a faster rate than they did years ago. Fires can burn, they can double in size every 30 seconds. We don't have a lot of time to get in there and do our work. Time is very crucial to save lives. It's very crucial to conserve property. The National Institute for Science and Technology is an organization who's performed many studies, like I said. Their mission is to promote U.S. innovation and industrial competitiveness by advancing measurement science, standards, and technology in ways that enhance economic security and improve the quality of life. They're a world leader in creating critical measurement solutions and promoting equitable standards. They base the studies that they show, there's a direct correlation between the number of personnel responding to a fire and a reduction in scene work time. The studies show there's more people you have on scene, less time for water on fire, less time for hose stretch to the fire, less time for ladder deployment, less ventilation time, less time to get to primary search and overall scene time, and most importantly, less time to occupant rescue. The more people you have, the faster you can accomplish these goals. If you reduce the responding units by even one, you dramatically increase the response time for us to get in there and do our jobs. We can provide these studies for you. There's at least a half a dozen. We can get them for if you want to read the data. The data proves it. We're not making this up. Further, the National Fire Protection Association, NFPA, creates minimum industry standards for fire, electrical, and related hazards. They provide national consensus standards for safe, efficient, and effective fire department operations. The Ottumwa Fire Department is compliant with many NFPA standards. The boots we wear are NFPA compliant. The helmets we wear, NFPA compliant. The coat, the pants, the trucks we ride on, how much reflective material is on the back, how much hose is on there, the nozzles that are on there. A lot of the equipment, the training that we do, the way we do our training is NFPA compliant. NFPA has a standard for staffing, 1710. We're not compliant with that. What NFPA says is that you need to have 14 firefighters on scene doing work in 8 minutes, 15 if you got a ladder or an aerial. We're not asking you to get to that level. We're not asking you to add staffing to 14 so we can get 14 so we can be compliant with NFPA 1710. We're asking you to maintain the current level that you have at 10. That's what I understand, right?
Okay, thank you. I'm going to call your time.
All right, thank you.
Rodney Long.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Thank you for your time. Just again, I just want to touch on a couple key things here. Chief Miller did an excellent job with this. You know, our big thing is we've 35 structure fires already this year. 3,500 calls we ran last year. We're on record to run more than that this year. I understand the city is in a financial crisis. You know, trying to figure out how they're going to fill all these positions. But at this particular time, to cut us, to cut PD, to cut any of them is not. This is not the right time to do it. There's not a right time to do it. We want to bring business to this community. You guys have already said that. If you can't offer public safety, you're not going to get anybody that's going to come to the town. We're not going to get business to come here. You're not going to get people to move here that want to, you know, come to a job here. So without a fully staffed police department, without a fully staffed fire department, it's just not going to work. We need to, you know, we have 3 budgeted positions already. Let's fill these positions. Let's make sure that PD gets filled. Give the guys what they need. If you guys are wanting, you know, more staffing analysis, Andy, I know you've done one. The IFF is working on a staffing analysis right now for us. As soon as I get that, I will give that information to all of you guys. Other than that, does anybody have any questions for us?
Okay, thanks, Rodney. Looks like Kim Shaw.
Thank you for giving me the time and the opportunity to speak up here. I come here today not just as a spouse of an Ottumwa police officer, but also as a parent and a member of this community. As you've heard today, we are in a great need for additional officers to help serve Ottumwa and to keep it safe. But I'm not going to speak about statistics or numbers. I want to share with you what it's like as a spouse and as a family member and what impact this has on the families of these officers. Being an officer's family has always meant that your officer might miss a dinner, a recital, a ball game, And the risk of your officer not making it home safe is always in the back of your mind. Some would say that this is part of the job and the sacrifice an officer and his family has chosen to make. And I would agree, as I watched my officer be sworn in here in Ottumwa almost 11 years ago. What's changed as these officers are now working 12-hour days straight without a day off. They're holding over almost every shift and at times having only 8 hours in between shifts. We see these officers work when they're tired, when they're sick. Officers, if they don't work, they won't have backup for their other officers, and our community won't be served and protected the way it deserves to be. We don't have enough patrol officers to cover the needs of the community. This is seen through all the statistics others have shared with you today. What this means for these families and for myself is that the chance of their officer, my officer, not coming home or being hurt while on duty is increased. It means these officers are not only missing dinner, but they're missing birthdays, important family events, and at times they don't even have the opportunity to sleep or eat in between shifts. It means that the community I love is not being able to be served and protected the way it should be. As I visit with other families of these officers, some new to the city of Ottumwa, I'm hit with the realization that there is a fear to raise a family here, a community who is at risk and underserved. If you want officers and their families to stay here, they need to know, and we need to know, that the backup is here for our officers to do this job as safe as possible. See, these officers, they're not just the men and women who serve the city of Ottumwa. They're not just the ones you call to protect you or to run to the thing that you're running from. They are our husbands, our wives, our fathers, our mothers, our sons, and our daughters. They are our world. They are our family. 11 years ago, I understood the sacrifice. However, this city also had a commitment to give these officers the resource and tools that they needed to do this dangerous public service as safe as possible. And at the end of the day, if one of these men or women are injured or, God forbid, have a final call that they answer, can we say that we had their back, or as officers say, had their six? Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. John Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is John Thomas. My job is I'm the union representative for the Ottumwa police officers. I also represent about 25 other agencies. So I think hopefully if I go over a minute or two, I think I have some insight to give you as to kind of what's going on a broader scale. The shortage of officers is not simply an Ottumwa problem, but a problem across the metro. So I want to give you the example. 6 months ago, there were 100 police officer openings within 25 miles of Des Moines. Ankeny, for example, was down 11 officers. Ankeny, brand new police department, great city to work for. Their problem wasn't money. Their problem was leadership. They had a bad leader and people left. He ran them off. People quit law enforcement. West Des Moines, similar problem. They were down 6. Obviously, you might have saw that in the news. We had some bad leadership. Officers left in the droves. Officers who never left West Des Moines went to the Des Moines Police Department, which was almost unheard of. I tell you this because I want you to realize that you're not alone in this. Is it difficult for the Ottumwas in the world to compete with the Des Moines Metro, where most agencies have starting salaries that are $8,000 more, where they top out at more than $10,000 more than your officers do? It is. I've had this conversation with numerous folks. Your cost of living isn't the same. The compensation package for Ottumwa allows officers to live a good standard of living. That's not our issue. Our bigger issue as a police officers it's the standard of living. It's the quality of life. I want to make sure we clarify something. In the case where the officer worked 13 weekends in a row, that's because his weekends aren't scheduled days off. If you want a weekend off, you have to take compensatory time or a day off of vacation. Officers have Tuesdays and Wednesdays off and things like that. Working a 12-hour shift, I'll get to it in a second, allows officers to have every other weekend off. If you look at your officers sitting here, most of the officers that have more than 5 years on came from within 25 miles of Ottumwa. Your officers that stay here are from here. The officers you're hiring from out of town or from across the state are getting their feet wet. And Chief's right. If you've got 3 or 4 years on in Ottumwa, you're a cop's cop. You've been around the block and you have a lot of experience, and that's good and it's bad. Hiring new officers, you have obstacles. The first obstacle is nobody wants this job for a number of reasons. You couple that with the fact that those who do typically apply at more than one agency at a time. I'll give you the perfect example. Dallas County Sheriff's Office, a place I used to work, hired a certified officer from another agency. And that officer, after being at Dallas County less than 2 months, left and went to the West Des Moines Police Department. Officers who apply for you have their names on 5 or 7 lists, and they're going to take whichever offer is the most lucrative. Like the chief said, people are moving where your spouse is at, things like that. So that's an obstacle Ottumwa can't overcome. Lastly, I think the city would tell you that the last time they hired a certified officer is very rare. You don't get certified officers, and I don't know the answer to that. I can answer the question is this. It costs the city of Ottumwa, based upon the starting hourly rate, which I'll tell you was $21.23. It costs the city of Ottumwa $36,000, and that doesn't include benefits, retirement, or buying uniforms and body armor. That's what it costs you to hire an officer, send them to the academy for 16 weeks, and then train them for 14 weeks after. 36,000 is your real number.
You're over your time, but because of your experience with other communities, and I think it would be valuable information, I'll grant you a little leeway here. So
I'll keep going, sir, and I'll try and be brief. The city of Ottumwa has sent 12 officers to the academy in the last 3 years. That's an expense of over $400,000. We are extremely interested in trying to figure out how to reduce those dollars that just keep ever going to the academy. Until we develop a plan, and you will never fully solve it, but that's going to be a continuous cost to the city of Ottumwa. There are contracts, and I don't know if the city has one with new officers that allows you to recoup the training costs if they go somewhere else. But it is true that Ottumwa is not unique in the fact that it just takes time to get an officer up. The scheduling issue, the union leadership sat with the chief and Lieutenant Hux and Farrington for 2.5 hours to look at 12-hour shifts. Marshalltown went to 12-hour shifts. I was instrumental in helping them do that. It allows officers to have every other weekend off. It allows you to see your kid's soccer game and be a part of the family. It really is preferred in a lot of agencies. It does require manpower. And at the end of the day, after 2.5 hours and looking at Burlington, looking at Marshalltown, looking at all these other agencies, we were all left with one problem. We're short bodies. And to Councilmember Dalby, point, you're exactly right. Even if you grant us 45 officers, you're never going to be on the hook for 45 officers because you are always going to be a few short. But I think the number was 41, correct, Chief? We need 41 to run 12-hour shifts. But there is a direct correlation to that. Real quick, your overtime budget. You line item budget $95,000 a year. Last year, that ended June 30th, you had spent almost double that. Your $95,000 line item budget for overtime this year, you've spent $34,000 of it today's August 29th. Overtime is an inherent issue in law enforcement. You're not going to solve it by hiring more officers, because when an officer an hour before their shift goes to a traffic fatality or a domestic assault with serious injuries, we don't send the guy home or the officer home at 11 o'clock. They have to finish that call. The bottom line really is this. With the Teamsters representing more law enforcement than anybody else in the state, and I personally representing over 25 agencies, this is sincerely the most dire staffing issue of any police department I have. You have 38 officers. You have 2 openings right now. You have 2 more leaving in the next few weeks. You have 2 out on medical, another one for maternity and paternity. Your effective force is less than 30. Ottumwa also uniquely has more school resource officers than almost any one of your comparables. Now, that doesn't necessarily relate back to the cost incurred by the city because of the school district funding, but it is important to know that when you look at 38 and you have 3 in the schools, those are 3 people that aren't on patrol. Lastly, I'd just like to reiterate, I do think public safety is absolutely your priority. You have to have adequate staffing. Now, you have the difficult decision to decide what that adequate staffing is for the police and the fire. I think both of the police and the fire have come here tonight to say we are very open to having honest conversations about that, and I think we can sit down and think outside the box to try and work together on it at a forum that's a little less formal than this. Thank you for your time very much.
Thank you. Steve Siegel.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Appreciate the opportunity. I really didn't know much about this issue really till tonight. Listening to everybody talk, I knew a little bit about it, but not much. And I guess what I heard is you have a larger fund balance than you thought you were going to have, Bob. Is that correct? Yeah. And the main fear, what I'm hearing, is what the state's going to do to you financially. Well, we don't know what the state's going to do. You know, I don't think there's any reason to think they're going to stop the rollback or reimbursing cities and counties. We'll have to wait and see. They might, what they should do is take a look at the bill itself, but that's another story. But I don't think it's a given, but I think that's what's gotten the state into financial problems is the tax credits and taking a lot of entities out. And frankly, we've done the same thing here on a smaller level with Kohl's and Walmart and some of the tax breaks we give. You know, the chickens come home to roost at some point. So, you know, these folks, the police and the fire, work really hard. And from what I've heard tonight, are way below other comparable sized cities in numbers. So to reduce those numbers further doesn't make any sense to me. And I think we shouldn't jump to conclusions on what the state's going to do on this commercial rollback. So I hope you will add staff or at least hold off on making a decision like this, because I don't think you have the information you need at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. I speak to one item. This relates, Mr. Siegel mentioned, but another item I think that needs to be put into context, and that is the issue of cuts. As council members probably know, I've not heard this theme tonight, but I want to speak to this anyway. When I came on board, one of the very first things I did was establish a committee with council members. Strebe and Rose served on this, and we set subsidy limits for Bridgeview in terms of the amount of money that comes out of the general fund. As many of you know, I was with the city 10 years ago, and 10 years ago, we were putting upwards of $700,000 a year general fund monies in, quite frankly, to mollify the deficits that we had in Bridgeview. We set a committee this year that set that limit at $400,000. It goes to $350 next year and $350 the year after that. Thankfully, we finished this year at about $364,000. That's a significant portion, a significant savings to the city. And I also want to emphasize, I know there's those that have their disagreements and thoughts about Bridgeview. It's an economic engine for us, and you look at the return on the investment where people are coming to town and they're utilizing that, and I think Scott Hallgren's doing a very good job. The second thing I did was eliminated 2 full-time positions. Now, as you may recall, and the fire department wants apparently council to vote on it, that's fine. I did not have to seek approval for eliminating those 2 positions. Maybe they didn't have the political power. It's certainly a legislative decision up to council, and it certainly seems to me that the council's leaning that way, and that's fine. I've indicated my job is to give advice and consent to council, and council can confirm, deny, or modify. We'll continue to look at reductions in areas that affect the general fund, because that's where the greatest, let's just say, challenges are on. That's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Andy. Mr. Joe Denton.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilman. I would like to start to say that these 2 gentlemen sitting right here look at me and say, I need men. I don't care about apples, oranges, or any other numbers. These 2 men need the men. They know their knowledge. They have it on paperwork. Let's get them help. Public safety is number 1. Why put citizens of Ottumwa in harm's way? The other thing is, as we stand here tonight, we have technology. We have phones. We have cameras on us. So what are we saying to the other cities out there? We're debating on this. They're looking at us right now, going, why is Ottumwa debating this issue? I feel we need to stop with the derelict houses. We need to stop trying to tear down St. Joe. We need to make sure we're fully staffed. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Counselor, are there any closing comments from anybody on staff here?
I'd have a closing comment, Your Honor.
Certainly.
I just want to make sure we know where we're at for the record. The first question I have is, moving forward, we haven't set any kind of benchmarks, like you like to call it, Andy. What are we doing from this point forward is what I kind of want to know. I think it's very clear that we've got a shortage, and I think we've got most of the information that we could possibly get as far as financial situation, backfill information, staffing information. I mean, we've got a lot of stuff here. And I don't think, dragging it out is going to make it any better. But we're not there yet. Tonight's just a discussion, but I'd like to see action taken fairly quickly because we're not going to drag this out until the end of the year. That's my opinion. Again, I'm speaking as one council person. We talk a lot about the scenarios that could happen. I tend to believe most of those will happen. But let's remember, if we had have a fully staffed fire department at this point of 32, we had a fully staffed police department at this point in time, 38, even add one open position, not the additional, our results year end would look exactly the same as they do now. We'd have anywhere from a range, I found out tonight, from 21 to 23% reserve ratio. We'd still have an excess in the general fund. If we start talking about adding more than what's budgeted for, then we get into the problem of having to find the money to fund it. But we're not there. We've budgeted the monies. The positions aren't filled. The money's there. This would look exactly the same if all positions were manned at this point in time. So we got to keep that in mind. Number three, I would just say let's move on a decision fairly quickly. It doesn't have to be tomorrow, but somewhere in the near future. And just for the record, with the data and evidence, I told City Administrator Morris over a year ago that I would be on board with his recommendations if I saw clearly that we were overstaffed in either fire or any. At the time, it was a fire department issue. And through all these big books of stuff and information from staff who's been very diligent and very actually patient with us, they've been a little irritated with the way we've done things, but they've got us the information just like that we've needed, and it's been fairly accurate. So I don't want to denigrate them any. They've been great to work with. But I think it finally falls on our shoulders. What are we going to do? And I think we need to do that and not drag it out to the end of the year. So within a week or two, we should probably make a decision. I would like to see us fully staff the fire department, fully staff at least close to finding out how we can implement this 12-hour policy. It sounds like they're open for negotiation. Maybe that's their business. If it would relieve our officers, I think there's a way to do it without adding overtime. I've been told that. We need to look at that. That's a policy decision I think we need to stand behind and say, let's look at it and get it implemented if it will work. I'd also like to see us add definitely officers. That was where this really stemmed from, the immediate need. I've rode with the officers. I've seen it. Those guys do an unbelievable job. And I won't go into details because, it's probably not even appropriate to discuss that here. But I'd like to see a fully staffed department with at least 38 officers, if not 40. And that's my position. And like I said, I told Andy Morris, if I see evidence to the contrary, I will vote with you on the recommendation. To this point, I haven't seen the numbers yet. And I think this council has done a darn good job of being vigilant and never aware of what's coming down the line with the state legislature. We get it. We know. So thank you, and thank you, staff, for all your patience through this.
Okay.
Well said, Matt.
I agree with Councilman Dalby, and I've held that position all along.
Mark? I would just echo Councilman Dalby also. And as one final thing, it's a very rare opportunity that we have this many public safety officers in the room. So thank you for all that you guys do.
Okay, if there's nothing else, I'd make a couple closing comments. I think the challenge is in front of us to do what is both good for public safety, which includes both fire and police. We want the city to be safe. We also have a fiduciary responsibility to keep the Treasury safe and sound. I think one of the things that Bob gave us some time ago, which I found really interesting, and certainly talking to people in the community has made a difference. If you own a $100,000 house right now, just use that because it's easy to do the numbers. You're going to pay $1,200 in taxes to the city. Now, there's more than that, but that's what you pay to the city. And of that $1,200, $326 goes to the police department to fund the police department. If you look at the fire department, $251 go to fund the fire department. And you can go right down the line and look at parks and recreation and all the things, administration. I think it boils down to sometimes you have to pay for what you value. And so while our taxes are high, you know why they're high. Whoever said it, Skip, I think you said 74% of our houses are valued under $100,000. Actually, we lead the state in the number of houses valued under $50,000, which is even worse. So the amount of money we have to work with is not comparable, and I give Bob credit for the fact that when you compare us to other cities, you have to look at not just population, but their treasury and their valuation, and we don't hold a candle to some of them. We are working on that, and I think everybody on this bench has been working hard on economic development. We need to do more with that. That's going to help raise the tide, if you will, and if the tide rises, we all do better. We've got to work hard on that. I would like to ask that based on the information tonight, and I think Mr. Thomas made a good point, he represents a whole bunch of other communities. Maybe there's something in a nugget of discussion that we can glean from each other if we have some sit-down, hard discussion across the table. We don't have to agree on everything, but let's be civil, let's be respectful, and let's solve the problem. The problem is we've got to have good public safety. I've heard more people say, I'm not coming to Ottumwa because I hear about your drug problem, your crime rate, your fire, the number of structural fires. That's not what we want people to hear. We want people to say, we want to come here because it's a great place to live and work and raise a family, and we have good people doing the jobs for the city. So I think it would be appropriate, Matt, I think it was your comment, let's ask the city staff to come back with some recommendations of how we can solve the problem and what they would recommend to the council, and then you as council have to vote it up or vote it down. And I think at some point, that's going to be a difficult evening, but I think we'll never have total information. I mean, I just been around long enough. We'll never have a perfect situation. So we've got to work with what we know today, trust the staff and the outside people. Again, I think Mr. Thomas, representing 25 other organizations, has a vantage point that we don't have. Let's take advantage of that. Let's do some more research and homework for ourselves. And then let's make a decision. And our next standard meeting would be the 5th, and the next one would be the 19th. So by the 19th, I think we should have enough information and we can make a final decision and give our staff some direction so they can move on to taking care of the other things that they have to do when we're not doing this kind of work. Are there any other suggestions or comments?
I would support that, Your Honor, just to let you clear, to make it clear, I would support that move by in 2 weeks, having some kind of recommendation in front of us.
Mr. Mayor, just to echo what Councilman Dalby said, we can certainly have something to you, but the 5th is a little quick. By the 19th, we can have something. Sure.
That's fine. Okay, if that's where you're at, then let's, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting tonight, and we'll have a recommendation on the 19th.
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.